Has anyone ever wondered why we work an 8-hour day? And has anyone ever thought about, have any of you ever thought about why we have this apparent 8-hour day and why our working day is apparently 9 a.m. to 5 p.m? Well, there's a history lesson in this. So back in the late 18th century, the Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and factory workers really needed to get the most out of their workers. They wanted to maximise production. So people were working sun up to sundown. They were working really long hours, and men, women and even children, like these gorgeous small boys here, were working 10 to 16-hour days. And they needed to work this hard because wages were really low and people had to work such long hours just to survive. It wasn't until around the middle of the 19th century, so the mid-1800s, that one of the first socialists, Robert Owen, started to campaign for a day that was divided into thirds. And so his campaign was that we should have 8 hours labour, we should have 8 hours rest, and we should have 8 hours recreation. So let's think about those thirds for a minute. If I think of the word rest, it's a lovely word. And when I think of the word rest, I think of being at home. And this is not my bedroom, but I do wish it was. And so when I get home from work, the first thing I do is I actually put my pyjamas on. I relax, I sort of get set up for the night. I look forward to just hanging out at home and then having a good night's sleep if I'm lucky. And if we think about this word recreation is a fun word. And for a lot of people, it means a lot of different things. So it could mean you like skiing, it could mean you like going out for dinner, it could mean you enjoy going to the movies. For me, recreation is about being at the beach, and this is me at the beach, and these are my toes, and I didn't deliberately match my nail polish with the water, but that was a lovely coincidence. So everyone's got different ideas of what recreation means to them. But if we think about this word, work, and even the word itself just sounds really dull and dreary and boring. And even though I love what I do, and even though I know better, and even though my workplace is not like this, when I think of the word work, this is what I think of, which is pretty depressing and it's pretty dreary. And I can tell you that a lot of the clients we've worked with before they've had us in on their team, working with them, their workplaces have looked pretty similar to this. So if work has this connotation of dreariness to it, and if it's this thing that is more associated with labour than it is with recreation or rest, I want to look at how much a part of our lives work is. So when I was doing my research for this talk, I came across a website called Workaholics Anonymous. And there's 20 questions on the website, and if you answer 3 out of those 20 questions in the affirmative, you could have a problem with work. So let's just have a look at these questions. So do you take work with you to bed on weekends or on vacation? Well, yes. Do you work more than 40 hours a week? I own a business, so of course I do. Do you turn your hobbies into money-making ventures? Well, I met the CEO of Etsy recently, and I reckon she'd have a problem with that one. And do you believe it's okay to work long hours if you love what you do? I'm sure everyone would agree with me that that's true. And do you think about work while driving, while falling asleep, when other people are talking? Absolutely. And do you work or read during meals? Now, I don't know about you, but the last time, I'm always asking our team to stop and have a lunch break. Nobody ever does. So work has, become this huge part of our lives. And really what this quiz talks about is 2 things. One is that work is an enormous part of our lives, and the other is that work can cause us to become disconnected from the people around us, and work can cause us to become disengaged from our friends and our loved ones. So just moving beyond this concept of work as labour, Hugh Mackay, his book The Good Life, talks about how in Australia in particular we're on this quest for constant happiness. Like we just want to be happy, and when we talk about our kids we say, I just want them to be happy. But in his book he also talks about the direct relationship between how engaged we are with the community around us and our own personal satisfaction in life. So really what he's saying is it's through connection with other people that we gain happiness and satisfaction in our own lives. And studies have proved some of these things as well. So one particular piece of research has shown that employees with 2 or more friends at work are 96% more likely to be satisfied with their own personal lives. And employees with a best friend at work are 50% more likely to feel connected to the organisation that they work for. So there's some interesting research there. But I think what else has been discovered, though, is that being happy at work is not as easy as having someone to share a coffee with. And there's a good reason why we're not happy at work. So a few years ago, so my little boy is now 8, and I can tell you I still haven't worked out the juggle of being a full-time working person and a mum and a wife and a daughter and a sister and all of those things. And so a few years ago, I thought if I could learn to meditate, that might help the chaos in my life. And so my meditation teacher, I went to this place in Paddington, it was fantastic. I don't do it nearly often enough, I probably should do it a hell of a lot more. But one of the things that he taught me was that the amount of information that we're exposed to in one day is the same amount of information that a person 100 years ago was exposed to in their entire lifetimes. So that's a lot of information. No wonder we're stressed and overloaded. And I think there's a good reason for this information overload, and it's possibly to do with the fact that we are hugely dependent on technology. Now, this is a photo from the movie, Spike Jonze's movie Her from 2013. And it's a fantastic movie. It's really, really provocative. And the premise of the movie is that the main character, he falls in love with his operating system. And he thinks that he's having an emotional and a physical relationship with his operating system. And this movie is set in the not too distant future, so it's not that far from where we are now. And it all goes really well until he realises that his operating system is actually cheating on him with about 1 million other people. So the thing that really kind of struck home for me in this movie was that it's fairly close to where we are now. And we are also starting to see, even today, that people are having trouble in the workplace communicating face-to-face with each other. There's a lot of organisations, big organisations, who are bringing in organisational psychologists to actually teach their staff how to do face-to-face, because people know how to text, people know how to email, they don't know how to talk, or they don't know how to pick up the phone. So this basic thing that we have called communication is becoming a lost art. The other part of technology overtaking our worlds is that we're just constantly attached to our devices. Now, I Instagrammed before I got here, of course. How could I not? And you've probably heard of, you might not have heard of it, but there's this phenomenon called distracted walking. And it's basically people walking around with their mobile phones in front of their face and they're not paying attention. And we laugh about this in the studio all the time. I think one of the guys saw someone walking down the street the other day doing FaceTime down the middle of Kent Street and not paying any attention to what was going on around him. So in China, which potentially a social experiment, we're not quite sure how serious this is, but they've started to install these cell phone only lanes. They're 30 metres long. So if you're walking and talking on your cell phone, you stick to that lane and you don't knock anyone else down. But what's interesting about this, though, is that while it might be a social experiment right now, it's potentially the way of the future, and it does raise a lot of these questions. So as technology takes over our lives and technology companies are becoming bigger and bigger, think of Google, think of some of the big tech companies. So in 2013, Marissa Mayer, who's the CEO of Yahoo, took over and she called everyone back to the office. She said, everyone has to get off the road, no more working at home, I want people in the office. And there was a huge outcry against this because it was seen as being controlling and it was seen as being about presenteeism. But really what she was trying to do is she's trying to bring everyone back together so that they start talking to each other and communicating, and the business can actually start to become a much better business. And if you think about the flip side of this, we have Google, who have from day one encouraged people to never leave the office. So think about how successful Google is. and think about how successful Yahoo is. Now, we worked for Google. That was one of our projects in 2009. And you would have seen some of their workplaces on the internet around the world. And they're renowned for their workplace and how much their workplace caters to the needs of the staff. So there's actually this sort of unwritten rule of things that you have to include in a Google workplace. And they are, you've got to have a slide, you've got to have a fish tank, you have to have nap pods, you have to have an awesome cafe, 24/7 food, and you have to have sleep rooms, you have to have massage rooms, you have to have all these sorts of things. And when we designed the Sydney headquarters, we didn't have a slide. And I can tell you that was the thing everyone focused on day one. But Google's a real phenomenon. And to me, I think they're kind of scary in some ways in how big they're getting. But really, their whole sort of emphasis on workplace is you don't have to ever leave. And what this is saying too is that this built environment, as we become more digital and our connections with each other become more digital, to me what it's saying is the built environment is actually becoming more and more important. We're not becoming more fragmented. This space where we can actually get together is becoming critical. So physical space is becoming more important than ever. Are our workplaces really doing what we need them to do? So Susan Cain is a researcher. She wrote this book in 2012, and the premise of the book is that around a third to half of the population are introverts. But what's happening in our workplaces and in our schools is that the workplace doesn't cater for introverts. What it caters for are people who like to collaborate and people who get inspired by teamwork and people who feel really comfortable in this whole groupthink type of scenario. So what she's saying is that there's a lot of people, there's almost half the population who actually need quiet to be able to think, and they need private spaces and they need non-stimulating spaces in order to be creative. So there's a real move at the moment in the type of work that we do to create private space. Steelcase, who are a global workstation manufacturer, which sounds pretty boring, but they do a lot of research around work and the workplace. And one of the things that they've found recently is that they interviewed more than 10,000 people from around the world, from a bunch of different countries, and more than 85% of people their term is chronically disengaged from the workplace. And there's a few reasons for that. One is this mad push for open plan. What they're saying is people can't concentrate. Everybody's out in the open plan. There's no private space. They're constantly interrupted. It's too noisy. And really what's happening is that the workplace is not supporting different types of work styles. It's not supporting the introvert in order to be able to contribute effectively to the business. So where that brings me to is some case studies that we've worked on. So futurespace has been around for coming up to 15 years. I had to think about that one. And in the whole time that we've been doing workplaces and working with big organisations, we've always designed a brief to meet that specific client's needs. Like, we've never said to people, you can't have offices, you all have to go in the open plan. And there seems to have been this real push to, in the last probably 10 years prior, to get everyone into the open plan. And you're seeing CEOs, right through the organisation, right through to the interns, everyone's sitting in this 1.8 by 1.8 same workstation, and it's just not working for us. So what I've got to show you today, I've got 3 case studies from 3 different organisations who we've worked with to give them a workspace that meets their own specific needs as a business. So the first one is What If. When we first met What If, so What If is an online travel brand, most of you will probably have heard of it, and they're a fantastic organisation, great fun, great to work with. And when we first met them, they would not interview people in their own workplace because they were too embarrassed, and the workplace was completely misaligned with who they were as a business. They're a fun team. When they floated on the stock exchange, their handle was WTF. And so they used that through the workplace and had fun with it. So when we started working with them, it was all about how do we create an environment for you that is very much about who, what, if are, who the brand is, who the demographic is. So some of the things we did were we had secret Pinterest pages so that the What If team could pin stuff that they liked, and that was a fantastic way of getting everyone in the room engaged. It wasn't just about the PCG or the select few. And then because they live and breathe the brand, and they live and breathe travel, and Mags and the rest of our team and I, we're all pretty happy with doing a lot of travel as well. So travel became the thing that completely branded the workplace for them. And it's not just about, you can see the reception desk here is looking like stacked luggage. It's not just about sticking things on walls. It's about how the brand becomes inherent within the workplace. The other thing that was really key for What If was that they were in a really interesting, unique building. And the site that they ended up going into was one that I've been driving past for years and wanting to do a project in. So it was fortuitous in that way. But it was important to them that the space they were in had character. So the building that they chose is this heritage grain store in the western corridor of the CBD. And the way we designed the space for them was to use that existing architecture to create nooks and crannies and to create different types of environments for different types of activities. So, of course, we have open plan workstations. Of course, we have areas to collaborate. We have big team spaces. We have little team spaces. But it's all about that hidden nook or cranny. That sense of adventure that you find when you're travelling is also found in the workplace. So you can go around a corner, you can find a quiet one-person room, you can go around another corner, find a quiet team room, but then there's also the spaces to collaborate. And you can see here that we've got different levels of privacy, both visual and acoustic privacy. So obviously the curtain's not going to give you much acoustic privacy, but there's still this sort of barrier. So you can have quite different functions happening within the same space. So on a completely different level, this is Jones Lang LaSalle's workplace. They've now rebranded to JLL, and this was the Property Council of Australia's 2014 Workplace of the Year, which is a pretty high honour, and we're quite pleased to get this. And it's also, so JLL's workplace is only one of 12 six-star Green Star workplaces in Australia. And the reason for this really high sustainability rating is that the workplace embraces this new way of working, or this innovative way of working, that allows the space to work much harder and to work in a much more sustainable way. So Gav over here was our design director on this project. He's responsible for this one. I'm not going to claim credit for it. But just to touch on the aesthetic is about a boutique hotel look and feel. It's a very grown-up workplace. But at the same time, the workplace is all about providing a whole different range of settings and neighbourhoods for people to do different types of work in. So they've been given a huge amount of choice in this workspace, not just everyone out in the open plan. Again, this real variety of private and public space. And the reason this is much more sustainable is because whenever we do surveys with clients, we talk to them about, we do this survey that's called an observation study. And so we spend a week in a client's office from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, Monday to Friday of a typical week, the typical 8-hour working day. And we do this survey to see how much they're using their space. And, you know, there's a few different things we look for, and I won't give away all of our secrets, but what we typically find is that the workplace is vacant anywhere between 40 and 60% of the time. So if your environment is vacant between 40 and 60% of the time, you're heating and cooling and wiring this space that's not being used. So there's huge potential for the workplaces that we're in right now to be much more effective and much more efficient. The other thing about JLL too is this, you know, there's a lot of planting in there, so it feels really lovely and fresh, and the quality of the air is amazing. It's one of Australia's highest rated buildings as well from an overall base building point of view. But the stair itself assists in creating a different range of settings. So the stair is not just a way of getting from A to B. The stair is about How do you encourage people to move around the space and to talk to each other and communicate and collaborate? And I think from memory, the good coffee we usually put on the middle floor so that those above and below are forced to travel up and down. So you encourage these sorts of behaviours. And this is actually my favourite little space here behind the stairs. I don't know if you can see, but you can. There's power and data in the wall here, so it's very easy to sit there and work for long periods of time. It's acoustically treated. You're not staring at a blank wall. You've got planting and you've got beautiful surroundings around you. The good coffee is just upstairs. So it's about creating this environment for a very grown-up workforce, but huge amounts of flexibility. So JLL were told by their head office in Asia that you have this amount of space for the next 10 years, you have to make it work. So that was one of their drivers to actually get the most bang for their buck out of their physical environment. Now this is our most recently completed project, and it's REA Group in Melbourne, so realestate.com. This finished just before Christmas, and it's been such a success story. It's such an amazing project. I was there on the day that they moved in, and it was one of those torrential Melbourne storms. The streets were flooded, umbrellas were turning inside out, none of the public transport was working, people were calling in sick because they couldn't get to the office, and these guys just walked in, plugged in, 15 minutes and they were going, they were up and running, and the vibe and the buzz in the space was just amazing. So REA Group have been hugely inspiring for us to actually work with them. We've learned as much from them as they've been able to take from us in terms of designing of their workplace. So the way they run their business, it's an agile business. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Scrum or agile software development. So it's a way, instead of this waterfall method of developing projects and talking to people, so instead of, you do something, you pass it on to the next one, pass it on to the next one, pass it on to the next one, this Scrum or Agile way of working is you get everyone in the same room, you have everything up on the wall and you work through it together. So it's a team thing, it's about collaborating. But the other thing for these guys too is that they had been in a work environment that was 10 years old. They had legacy software, legacy technology, and they really needed a new home that was going to serve them for the next iteration of their business. And it's a hugely innovative business. It's one of Australia's most successful businesses. So the way we did that, or the way the team worked on that, was to design a space that had, again, this real variety of public and private spaces, this really sort of visually exciting, interesting environment, but also an environment that is, again, going to grow with the business. So currently they've got 7,000 square metres. I think they've got 460 people in those 7,000 square metres, or 560, sorry. And over those 4 floors, as the business grows, the space starts to work harder and harder. REA Group, they talk about themselves as being a fast-paced, a visual, a flowing and flexible business. So the workplace really keeps pace with that. So you can see here, we've got someone sitting in behind one of the more private walls, but then you've still got the workspace, typical workstations. And one of the other really exciting things about this project too was just that building on the idea of what a stair can do. So, and I have to say Gav, again, was responsible for all of this. So building on this idea of the stair being, again, not just a linking device, but something that allows people to actually stop and land on those spaces. So we've got meeting rooms in on the landings here, and allows people to really, connect with each other in the way that they need to. So there are 3 different approaches for 3 really different businesses. And as I mentioned before, they're all direct responses to a client's brief. So I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is the proposed design for Apple's new headquarters in California. Steve Jobs, before he died, compared it to a spaceship, and the local mayor has called it the mothership. But it will be home to 13,000 people. It's 4 levels, all the car parking's underneath. It's all sustainable. It's pretty much the proposal is that it will be pretty much self-sustaining. But what I find interesting about this is if you look at what's around it, it's nothing. So people, the whole idea is that people, when they come to work at Apple, they're not really going to be leaving. So Apple are designing this space that is about people coming together and being in the workplace, being with each other, but then also, you know, obviously there'll be that variety of them being able to do different things within the workplace. And I think what's interesting is, you know, looking at Apple as an example, they recently posted the most profit that any business has ever posted ever. So we all know it's a hugely successful business. So I think to be watching what they're doing with workplace is going to be a benchmark for what's happening going forward. But really what we try and do with those people is talk to them about what their needs are, not what do you want, how do you work, what is it that you need to do your job daily, and so what are the tools that you need around you, and really try and take them on this process of education. That means, you know, and it is a process, it's a learning process. We often work with change managers as well who assist with this. But it's really about teaching people to kind of break away from some of those old paradigms that they're really fixed on. Different generations want different things as well. I think it's hard to kind of generalise, but really older generations are looking for status and, you know, the corner office, particularly legal firms. But younger generations, what they're looking for is the access to mentoring, and they're looking for access to the senior people in the business so that they can learn. So yeah, I think the short answer is that it's that process of understanding, you know, where people are coming from. Sometimes I think I need a psych degree as well, but you know, it's understanding where people are coming from and how do we actually meet their needs without saying you can't have this. Yeah, it's a challenge. Different types of furniture. There's tricks that you can do, like, you know, put the good coffee on the middle floor. A lot of it's to do with teaching people how to use that new environment as well. People don't often get it on day one, and we talk about, you know, when people move in, that's really day two of them starting to understand the space and how they can make it useful for them. We had one example with Microsoft, where they were convinced that they wanted a stand-up meeting table. And after using it for a few months, they agreed that it wasn't really working for them. So we just changed the furniture out. So, you know, sometimes it can be, you never get it 100% right. You know, if you get it 90% right, that's fantastic. And then we often go back and, you know, we might do tweaks here and there. But I think the goal is to really make sure we design that inherent flexibility so that people can start to use the space as they want to. It's not about imposing something on people, it's about giving them ownership. I've done a code of silence for a client before. It was a financial services client of all things, but it was their own money, so they wanted this code of silence over the poker table. But Google was like that. They wanted this crazy stuff and they wanted us to do this. It was 12 different design themes within the one environment. And they wanted steampunk and, you know, all this crazy, crazy stuff. They wanted a stream flowing through a flat floor, which was never going to work. They wanted a train running around the ceiling that, you know, had notes on it that people could pass to each other, and it was pretty out there. And I felt like saying, well, God, you have email, don't you? But yeah, look, it was hard to manage that because, you know, the Googler's attitude is, you know, we can have whatever we want. But a lot of it was coming back to the person who was the project sponsor and trying to kind of bring things back in line with budget and the real world. But we do get those crazy requests, yeah. And it's fun too. It's fun for us to talk about in the office. Absolutely, I think it will change. I don't think it will go back to the way it was in the 1950s. And that's a good thing. But I think what people are seeking now is this hybrid of private and public space. I almost built offices for myself and my other director here early last year because the open plan was just driving me crazy. But yeah, we absolutely, and I think that's been something that we've been seeing for a while too as an organisation, that you know, there's activity-based working and agile working and all of this stuff going on, and heaps of collaborative space happening. But where is the private space? And clients are only just starting to understand that now, so we're kind of talking to them about that a lot more at the moment. It will definitely change to be much more of a hybrid of public and private. Yeah, we do that. So Jones Lang LaSalle have been doing that, and usually it takes about 12 months to get a good measure. So they've found that after 12 months in their new workspace, 70% of people can say that they're more productive. And a lot of the feedback is anecdotal, and we're only just starting to touch on how we use big data to capture some of these things. So because these types of activity-based working environments are fairly new, they're only a couple of years old, we're only just starting to see the data now, but we absolutely measure it because you have to test these things. So we've got a client, we've got a pharmaceutical client who we're working for at the moment, and it's quite interesting because their office is vacant like 70% of the time. Nobody knows where they are. But so they're looking at, so as they start to change and go activity-based, what they're doing is we're working with HR and a change manager at the same time to start to implement, because all their policies, there's no uniformity in the policies. It depends on who your manager is. You know, so they're starting to roll out uniform policies. HR is a huge part of this. When we talk about designing workplaces, we talk about it being from the point of view of people, place and technology. So people is the HR solution, it absolutely has to be addressed. Place obviously is the physical environment, and then technology is what technology is going to underpin this. So if you want an agile working environment, if you want an environment that's free address and no own desks, you need some really basic technologies like follow me printing. So if you don't have the right technology, it falls over. And so we talk about those things having to be addressed equally for any workspace project to be a success, whether they're agile or not. I have a white paper that is 5 ways that you can improve your own office environment right now, and it doesn't involve a huge redesign. There are some simple things that you can do to make a difference. And that pretty much brings me to the end of the talk. So if you want to, I'm obsessed with Instagram at the moment, so we thought that one of our hashtags for 2015 will be Happify Your Work. So feel free to use that because I'd love to see what you got, where you guys work. And feel free to follow us on Instagram as well because we've got some beautiful different types of workspaces, different types of stairs, and we're absolutely. If I can get to 3,000 followers, I can start doing some giveaways. So I'm almost there. But that's it from me.